My dad toasted my sister's wedding, my only daughter. Then he pointed at me. A mistake I made 32 years ago. Now my phone shows 73 missed calls. What did you do? My name is Ava Bennett. I'm 32 years old and 6 weeks ago, my own father stood up at my younger sister's wedding and erased me in front of 180 guests. I was standing in the back of the ballroom, behind the videographer's tripod, doing what I always do at family gatherings, remaining out of the way and pretending it didn't hurt. When my father took up the microphone for his speech, I had this ridiculous hope that for once, he'd remember he had 2 daughters. Out of habit, I opened my phone's voice memo app and hit record. That reflex, more than anything else, is why you are hearing this story right now. He tapped the glass with a fork. He addressed my daughter, and for a brief moment, my heart lifted. Then he laughed. I should say, my only daughter. This incredible woman up here is the pride of my life. That thing is standing in the back. As scores of heads turned, he made a vague gesture toward me. That was simply a mistake I made 32 years ago. Honestly, we should have put her up for adoption when we had the opportunity. The ballroom erupted. Some people laughed because they thought it was a joke, others because everyone else did. A few people looked away, embarrassed. Nobody stopped him. Nobody told him to sit down. I did not weep. I did not yell. I looked my father directly in the eyes, then slowly swept my gaze across the faces of those who had just witnessed my public execution and decided it was entertainment. Then I turned around, walked out of the ballroom, through the lobby, and out the revolving doors into the cold, wind-swept rain. On the sidewalk, water dripping through my dress, my phone still recording in my hand. I made myself a promise. This would be the final time they laughed at me without consequences. That night, I made 4 phone calls and sent 2 emails, which changed everything. 10 weeks later, my phone would show 73 missed calls and messages from the same people who laughed, all asking the same question. What have you done to us? Before I tell you what I did and how those 4 calls and 2 emails turned my father's joke into his worst nightmare, please tell me this. What time is it where you are now? And where are you watching from? I want to see how far the truth about my disastrous life can travel. The morning after the wedding, I awoke on my couch in Boston, still wearing the ruined dress. The edges of my eyes were crusted with mascara. My phone is on my chest. I started by pressing play on the recording. Hearing my father's voice through my earbuds, without the clinking glasses and polite laughter to obscure it, felt like being slapped a second time. I listened all the way until the ballroom roared and my heels clicked against the marble floor as I walked out. Then I saved the file, renamed it Evidence, Wedding Speech, and backed it up to the encrypted cloud storage I use for work. I work as a cybersecurity consultant for hospitals. Backing up sensitive data is second nature. Yesterday there were patient files and ransomware logs. Today, it was my father's voice calling me out for a mistake. I told myself 1,000 stories to get through the last 32 years. He is old school. That's all part of his sense of humor. You are overreacting. However, listening back, there was no way to soften it. He meant every word. And if he was willing to say that into a microphone in public, what else was he willing to do when no one was watching? The first call I made that night, standing in the rain, was to the only adult in my childhood who had ever seemed quietly horrified by how I was treated, my father's younger brother. For me, he had always been Uncle Jack. To the rest of the world, he was Jack Sullivan, my father's former co-founder, who had retired under mysterious circumstances 12 years prior. When he answered, his voice was sleepy and concerned. Ava, are you all right? I noticed the live stream cut out. But did you hear what he said? My voice did not shake. It came out cold. Have you heard the speech? There was a pause, followed by a slow exhalation. Your cousin sent me the clip, he said quietly. I've seen it 3 times. Your father has lost his mind. No, I explained. He's just saying out loud what he's always thought. I also recorded it. I'm done pretending it's just his sense of humor. I'd like to know what he's hiding. I'd like to know why he's always treated me as a problem that he regrets, rather than a daughter. Another pause, longer this time. Ava, this isn't just about hurt feelings, he explained. If you start pulling threads around Thomas Bennett, you'll find more than just mean jokes. You'll discover things you can't unsee. Then help me see them. I corrected myself. I'm not a kid anymore. You were pushed out of Bennett Civic Systems. I know that wasn't as clean as he made it sound. You know where the bodies are buried. Is this really what you want? He asked. Because once you start, there's no turning back from Sunday dinners and fake smiles. I remembered the ballroom laughter. We both know I was never truly invited to Sunday dinner. I said, meet me tomorrow, tell me the truth. He sighed. And in that sigh, I heard 12 years of suppressed resentment. Fine. 12:30 p.m. at the Quincy Diner. Do not text this address to anyone. And Ava, do not bring the phone that your father paid for. After I hung up with him, I dialed the second number, Natalie Pierce, my college roommate who is now one of the state's best financial crime attorneys. We hadn't spoken in months, but the moment she heard my voice, she knew something was wrong. What happened? She inquired. I sent her the audio file right there on the sidewalk, watching the upload bar move across the screen while raindrops dripped down my wrist. When it was finished, I asked, listen, then tell me what I can do with this. The third call was to my work phone. In other words, to myself. I left a detailed voicemail documenting what had happened, including dates, times, and the fact that I had recorded it. Then I converted the voicemail into a transcript and saved it in a secure folder alongside the speech. It wasn't just my heart speaking anymore. It was evidence. The email was sent to a generic, boring-looking address, integritymassprocurement.gov, the state procurement office's anonymous tip line. I didn't accuse my father of anything, not yet. I simply asked what citizens should do if they suspected a major city contractor was cooking books and retaliating against family members who knew too much. I pressed send at 1:42 a.m., my fingers still trembling, and watched the tiny paper plane icon vanish. Uncle Jack slid into the booth across from me at the diner the next day, his eyes red and his hands wrapped around his coffee as if he needed them to keep from shaking. For the first time in my life, he appeared terrified of my father. You really want to know why he treats you like that? He inquired without preamble. Because you're the one thing he can't control. You chose cybersecurity instead of joining his empire. You refused to sign his standard family agreement when you graduated, and he's been moving money and contracts into your sister's name for years to punish you for that. He removed a folded packet of old emails and board minutes from his jacket. He cut me out because I informed him that what he was doing was illegal. Fraud, kickbacks for public works projects, and false safety reports. Everything would blow up if someone with your skills and my receipts went digging. I stared at the papers, everything in me becoming very still. So let us dig, I said. If he insists that I'm a mistake, I will be the type of mistake that destroys his perfect little world. If you were in my situation, humiliated on camera by your own father and then given the first evidence that he may be a criminal, would you walk away to protect your family, or would you begin pulling on every thread you could find? Natalie Pierce did not waste time. By the afternoon after the diner meeting, we were sitting in a cramped conference room at her firm, the kind with no windows and a humming fluorescent light that made everything seem more serious. I had already scanned Uncle Jack's documents and sent them to her via a secure portal. She had read them twice before I arrived. Okay, she replied, tapping the stack with her pen. Bennett Civic Systems is run by your father, Thomas Bennett. They have had public contracts with the city for 18 years. Traffic lights, smart intersections and parking systems. These minutes show that he pushed his own brother out just before the company's biggest deal. She held up a photocopied email as a threat. Sign the separation agreement and don't talk about billing practices, or you'll never work in this town again. He wasn't joking, Uncle Jack muttered. I've been barred from city contracts ever since. My stomach turned. I grew up hearing my father discuss providing for the family. All of those late nights saved the city money. Now those stories tasted like ash. Natalie turned to face me. You work in cybersecurity for hospitals. She spoke. You understand logs, metadata, network traffic. If your uncle's right and your father is double billing or falsifying safety reports, there will be digital footprints everywhere. On email servers, in PDF drafts, in version histories. She tilted her head. But we do it by the book. No illegal hacking. We use what you can legally obtain through family, public records, and what your uncle already owns. Understood? I nodded. Understood. I lied a little. We began with what was public. I spent nights after work combing through city procurement databases, downloading every contract Bennett Civic Systems had won over the last decade. I compared project timelines to news stories about mysterious delays and unexplained outages, including one that made my blood run cold. A pedestrian died at an intersection where the new smart lights had malfunctioned. At the same time, Uncle Jack requested his personnel file and board correspondence from the years preceding his dismissal, citing whistleblower protections. Some of it came back heavily redacted, but Natalie knew which black bars indicated that someone was hiding something they shouldn't. At her urging, I submitted a formal request under the state's public records law for all safety inspections involving Bennett Civic Systems. Weeks have passed. My days were spent conducting hospital security audits and employee phishing trainings. My nights were spent working on spreadsheets and PDFs, and highlighter marks littered my kitchen table. As I dug deeper, a pattern began to emerge. Change orders are signed on Fridays at 4:50 p.m., doubling project costs without a clear justification. Invoices for consulting services issued to shell companies without websites. All are registered to a PO. The box is near my father's office. City engineers repeatedly expressed concern about vendor pressure to sign off on projects quickly. Each time I connected a dot, I heard his voice again. That thing in the back is simply a mistake. One afternoon I opened a spreadsheet that displayed the distribution of company shares. That's when his favoritism went beyond emotion. It became financial. 6 years ago, my sister Chloe was given a 30% stake in Bennett Civic Systems in recognition of her marketing and strategy efforts. My name did not appear anywhere. However, a familiar signature appeared on a line labeled Waiver of Future Claims to Family Assets. Mine was from the week I graduated college. I remembered the document now. He'd called it a standard form to make estate planning easier and shoved it in front of me at a noisy graduation dinner. I signed without reading, because I was overwhelmed and wanted to avoid a fight. My hands clenched around the printout until it creased. That night, I texted Natalie everything. He manipulated you into signing away your rights so he could funnel assets to your sister, she explained over the phone. It's disgusting, but it may also be leverage, especially if we can show a pattern of coercion and retaliation. Retaliation like humiliating me publicly to make sure I never challenge him, was what I responded. Exactly, she responded. We created a timeline. My graduation, the waiver, Uncle Jack's forced departure, the big city contract, the broken lights, and the wedding speech. The line between family joke and weapon became painfully clear. 2 weeks into our deep dive, I received an email from the procurement integrity inbox, which I had messaged following the wedding. This was not a form auto-response. It came from a real person, Ethan Caldwell, a compliance officer who asked if I would be willing to speak confidentially about potential Bennett Civic Systems irregularities. I looked at the screen for a long time. This was it. The moment when my private, petty and apparent family humiliation collided with actual law. I forwarded the email to Natalie. She called within minutes. If you talk to them, Ava, this will no longer be just a revenge fantasy. She stated that it becomes a whistleblower case. Are you prepared for that? For subpoenas, hearings, and informing your family that it was you. I imagined my father raising his glass and the room erupting. I imagined my mother looking away rather than stepping in, and my sister laughing along so she didn't ruin her wedding vibe. He chose to make me the villain in his story a long time ago. I said, if I'm going to be the villain, I might as well be the one who tells the truth. I agreed to attend the meeting. We scheduled it 4 weeks in advance to allow Natalie time to prepare. During those 4 weeks, the atmosphere at my parents' house, where I was still technically renting the small attic apartment, shifted from chilly to paranoid. My father began locking his home office. My mother jumped whenever the landline rang. Whispered conversations ended the moment I walked into the kitchen. They knew I was up to something. They didn't know what, but they were about to find out. If you discovered that your family's money and your own eraser were based on lies and rigged paperwork, would you keep the peace or risk blowing up everything to bring those secrets to light? Working in cybersecurity teaches you that people are careless with their passwords. My dad was no exception. Years ago, when I helped him set up his first smartphone, he insisted on using the same simple password that he'd always used. I begged him to change it. He refused. No one's interested in some old man's emails, he said sarcastically. He was not my client, so I let it go. Now sitting in my attic with my laptop's glow on my face and the wedding recording playing in my headphones, I opened a private browser window and entered Bennett Civic Systems' webmail address. I paused. Natalie's warning about sticking to the book echoed in my head. But then I remembered the waiver I signed at 23. The way he weaponized my trust. He never followed the rules when it came to controlling me. Why was I still playing nice? I typed in his corporate address and the old lazy password. The inbox has been loaded. Hundreds of messages, contract negotiations, forwarded jokes, and a few all-staff memos in which he complimented my brilliant daughter Chloe on her presentation. Nothing about his mistake in having a daughter. Of course, I did not snoop for fun. I established a simple silent rule. Any email he sent or received containing certain keywords, such as audit, inspection, change order, or my name, would be automatically forwarded to a new encrypted account I'd set up under a random alias. Then I signed out. If he was ever breached, there would be no clear path back to me. Within days, the forwarded emails began to trickle in. A thread in which a city engineer objected to signing off early. My father responded, "We've taken care of your supervisor, don't worry about it." An exchange with a banker about moving the final chunk into HC's trust before year-end. HC could only be Chloe. And then, one Thursday, an email appeared with a subject line that made my skin crawl. Saturday night, we had family dinner. It was not sent to me directly. It was from my father to my mother and sister. "We need to get Ava back in line before she does something stupid." He had written, "Let's keep things calm, make it appear as if we want to hear her out. I'll have the paperwork ready." My mother replied, "Are you sure this will work?" My sister, "It's my second weekend back from the honeymoon, Dad. Can we not make this a war?" My father, "It's already a war. She simply doesn't know the rules." Saturday at 6:45 p.m. That restaurant she enjoys. She will come if you invite her. I had no idea what paperwork he meant, but I knew I wasn't going into an ambush unprepared. When my mother knocked on my attic door that night and asked in a careful, brittle voice if I wanted to have a nice family dinner to clear the air, I smiled. "Sure," I replied. "I'd love that." On Saturday I arrived 12 minutes early at the restaurant, carrying a compact USB drive in my purse and a folded-in-half printed transcript of the wedding speech. The hostess showed me to a private room in the back. My parents and sister were already seated. 3 pairs of eyes looked at me with varying degrees of guilt, annoyance, and fear. My father said, "Ava," standing up just enough to appear polite, "You look presentable. I thought you looked just like a man who shouldn't reuse passwords." But I had just taken my seat. After a few minutes of pretended small talk, he got to the point. He slid a manila envelope across the table. "I asked you here because I'm concerned about you," he said in his worried father voice. "You've been emotional since the wedding, saying things to extended family that may jeopardize our reputation. I want us all to move forward." The envelope contained an extremely aggressive non-disclosure agreement. It basically stated that I would never, under any circumstances, speak negatively about him, his company, or internal family business on the risk of being sued for everything I owned. In exchange, he offered me a check for an insulting amount and a temporary rent reduction for the attic. He wanted to buy my silence cheaply. "So, let me get this straight," I said calmly. "You humiliate me in public, call me a mistake into a microphone, and your solution is for me to sign a legal document promising never to speak about it." He shifted in his seat. "It was a joke," he said. "People knew I didn't mean it. You're exaggerating the situation." I pulled the folded transcript from my purse and slid it across the table because this is word for word what you said. My phone recorded it, as did the videographer, and I've backed it up 7 times. I've already shared it with an attorney and a state procurement officer, both of whom believe it demonstrates a pattern of psychological abuse and retaliation. My mother took a deep breath. My sister looked at me as if she had never seen me before, and my father's face changed from pink to a deep, dangerous red. "You what?" he asked. I didn't flinch. "You've been transferring assets to Chloe's name, removing your brother, intimidating city officials, and using my existence as a punchline." I told Dad. "You made 4 mistakes. The first was underestimating my ability to pay attention. The second was assuming that I would never fight back. And the third," I pulled the compact USB drive from my purse and placed it on the table, "was leaving a trail." He didn't touch it. "What's on that?" he asked tightly. "That's enough," I said. "Enough emails, contracts, side agreements, enough to make some very serious people very interested in how Bennett Civic Systems does business." The room went silent except for the noise of the restaurant outside. Finally, my sister spoke, her voice thin. "You're going to destroy us," she whispered. "You're going to destroy everything he built." I looked at her. As I walked out of the restaurant, my father's voice followed me. "Ava, don't you dare do anything you can't undo." I stood up, leaving the NDA untouched, and said, "You invited me here to bring me back in line. Consider this my official notice that I've stepped off the line completely." I didn't look back. "You should have thought of that before you grabbed the microphone," I called over my shoulder. "If your family sat you down, smiled, and slid an NDA across the table to silence you, would you sign for the sake of peace, or would you walk away and make them afraid of what you might do next?" The fallout from the family dinner came quickly. My father stopped communicating with me entirely. My mother's texts became clipped, neutral messages about mail and utilities, but it was my sister, Chloe Bennett, who surprised me. 3 days after the dinner, she called and asked, "Can we talk?" she inquired, her voice small. We met, not at a cafe like in some cliché movie, but at the climbing gym where I usually go to get out of my own head. On weekdays, it was mostly empty, and we sat on the crash mats under a wall of brightly colored holds, while a pop playlist hummed in the background. Chloe looked out of place in her designer leggings and pristine sneakers. "You picked an interesting battleground," she said, looking up at the wall. "You picked a convenient time to remember I exist," I told you. She winced. "Okay, I deserve that." For a moment, we just sat there, two women who shared DNA and almost nothing else. Chloe was everything my parents bragged about. Polished, agreeable, the perfect marketing director for my father's company. Whereas I was the one who broke things for a living and told people where their security failed. She blurted, "I didn't know he was going to say that at the wedding, and I wouldn't have let him." "You laughed," I said, looking directly at me. She flushed. I panicked. Okay, everyone was staring at me. It was my wedding night, and he was drunk, so I figured if I made it seem like a joke, it wouldn't be so bad. I asked, "How did that work out? Does it feel less awful now?" She swallowed hard. "No, a beat. But Ava, talking to lawyers and state offices is going too far." I took a printout from my bag, not of my father's speech this time, but of the shareholder registry I had discovered, and tapped the line with her initials. "He gave you 30% of the company," I said, "and he tricked me into signing away my rights by claiming it was standard paperwork. You want to talk about going too far?" She stared at the paper, her face drained of color. "I didn't know about this," she whispered. "He told me you weren't interested in the business. You said you didn't want anything from him." I said I didn't want to be his employee, but I never said I didn't want a father. She looked up at me, her eyes shining, and said, "He paid for my wedding, grad school, and when I didn't get that first promotion, he created a position for me. I assumed he was simply being supportive. He was buying your loyalty," I said gently, "and punishing me for not being viable." She hugged herself and asked, "So what now? You burn everything down, and call it justice." "I don't want you to be homeless, Chloe, and I don't want you to be punished for things you didn't know, but I'm tired of allowing him to hurt people and hide behind family members. The city deserves to know if his systems are unsafe. His employees deserve to know why your uncle vanished. And I do not deserve to be labeled a mistake by the man who created me. He's still our dad," she said desperately. "And he's the only one we have." "No," I said quietly. "He is the only father we have by blood, which is not the same thing." We sat in silence for a while, listening to someone fall off a root and land on the mat with a soft thud before Chloe spoke again. "If you go through with this," she said, "he'll come for you legally, emotionally, whatever he can. He'll say you're unstable. And he'll tell everyone this is because you're jealous of me." I said, "He's been saying that all my life. But this time I have receipts." She nodded slowly, then stood. "I can't help you," she said, not openly. "I owe him too much, and he could ruin my career." She hesitated. "But Mom has been hiding things too. Bank statements, letters from the city. She keeps them in a locked drawer in her office at the district building. If you want to know how deep this goes, that is where I would start." I stared at her. "Why are you telling me this if you're not on my side?" She gave a sad little smile. "I didn't say I wasn't on your side," she said. "But I can't look like I am." As she walked away, I realized the golden child was not as blind as I had assumed, but rather more entangled. If your sibling told you they couldn't stand with you in public but quietly handed you the key to the next secret, would you despise them for their cowardice or accept it as the only courage they could muster? My mother, Karen Bennett, had spent her career in education, and by the time all of this happened, she was an assistant superintendent for the school district, polished, diplomatic, and very good at pretending problems didn't exist if admitting them would upset the balance. Her office was on the third floor of a bland administrative building near downtown. I'd been there a few times as a teenager to drop off forgotten lunches, but never to confront her as an adult. I called and asked if we could talk. "I am busy," she said automatically, then sighed. "Come by at 3:45. We'll have a few minutes before my board prep." At 3:45 p.m., I walked past the receptionist, up the elevator, and down the hall lined with student artwork and motivational posters. My mother's door was half closed, so I knocked and stepped inside. She looked smaller behind the big desk than she did at home, and her professional mask slipped slightly when she saw me. Ava said, "This is not a good time." There's never a good time to admit your husband may be a criminal," I said, closing the door behind me. "We should get started anyway." Her eyes flashed. "Watch your tone," she snapped, then quietly asked, "What do you want?" I sat down without being invited. I spoke with Chloe, who told me that you keep financial documents in a locked drawer, statements, letters from the city, and anything else you don't want Dad to know you have. My mother's hand moved so quickly toward the drawer that it was almost comical. She had no right. "You had no right to stand there at that wedding and let him call me a mistake," I interjected. "You had no right to help him hide money, kick people out, and pretend you didn't know because it kept the house clean and the vacations paid for." She slumped back. The fight drained from her shoulders, and for the first time, she appeared tired and old. "You don't understand the position I'm in," she said. "He controls everything. The house, the retirement accounts, your tuition, Chloe's. If I push too hard, he threatens to cut us off, to leave and take everything. Do you know what it's like to build your entire life around someone who can ruin you with a single signature? Do you know what it's like to grow up in that house?" I responded, learning that love is conditional, and humiliation is only a joke. After a long moment of silence, my mother whispered, "Open the drawer." I paused. "What?" "Open it," she repeated, her voice flat. "If you're going to tear this apart, you might as well see the whole mess." I walked around the desk. She unlocked the drawer with a small silver key and slid it open. Inside were neatly labeled folders: House Refi 2019, College Funds, Bennett Civic Systems, Miss C. I pulled out the last one, which contained copies of letters from the city procurement office raising serious questions about billing discrepancies, as well as a warning notice about potential contract suspension if the issues were not resolved. A handwritten note in my father's unmistakable scroll said, "Don't worry, I'll handle this." The dates on the bank statements that showed large transfers from business accounts into a trust in my sister's name and withdrawals from what was supposed to be a college fund in my name corresponded to significant family emergencies. "You co-signed these?" My mother's signature sat next to my father's on several documents. "He said we'd put it back," she whispered. "He said it was temporary." "And you got your cybersecurity scholarship," I thought. Her voice trailed off. It was easier not to think at all. I flipped to the back of the folder and froze. There, stapled to a letter from the city, was a copy of my own waiver, which I had signed at graduation. The attached note from my father to my mother read, "Once this is signed, she's off the table legally. Focus on H's stake. She is the future." My mother appeared to be sick. "I hadn't seen that note before," she whispered. "He didn't show me everything." "But you saw enough," I said softly, "to know you were choosing him over me." Her eyes welled up with tears, which she wiped away angrily. "Do you think I had real choices, Ava?" she inquired. "I married him at the age of 21. I did not complete my degree until you were in early high school. He had complete control over the finances, including the mortgage and retirement plans. If I left, where was I supposed to go? How was I supposed to care for you? You were supposed to stop him from tearing me down whenever he got bored, and I told you to draw a line somewhere. Even if you couldn't leave, you could have said, 'Not my child.' Instead, you locked the evidence in a drawer and hoped it would vanish." She sighed. "What are you going to do with this?" she inquired, nodding to the file in my hands. "I already have a meeting with the state compliance officer," I said. Natalie believes there is a strong whistleblower case, and this folder only strengthens it. My mother stared at the window behind me, her eyes unfocused. He will lose everything, she said, including the contracts, the company, and possibly even his freedom. He should have thought of that before he decided laws were for other people, I said. And before he decided his daughter was disposable. She swallowed. If I give you my own statement, she said slowly. If I admit what I've seen, maybe it will show that I'm cooperating, and maybe they'll go easier on me. Maybe, I said. I can't promise anything, but it will reveal the truth that he didn't just make mistakes. He made repeated decisions. For the first time, my mother looked directly at me, as if she recognized the adult I'd become rather than the child she'd failed. I am so sorry, Ava, she said, her voice breaking. Sorry isn't a time machine, I explained. But if you mean it, you'll back it up in writing. That night in my attic, I added my mother's documents to the growing digital case file and typed up a summary of what she'd told me, with each keystroke feeling like hammering another nail into the coffin of the life we'd pretended was normal. If you discovered that your parents had ignored your pain for years because it was easier than losing their lifestyle, and now they wanted your help to save themselves, would you close the drawer and walk away, or would you use what they handed you to finally force the truth into the open? 10 weeks after my father stood up at my sister's wedding and called me a mistake, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating on my desk. It was a Tuesday, and I was in the middle of a hospital phishing awareness training when my bag began to slide across the floor due to the constant buzzing. During the break, I checked the screen, and there were dozens of missed calls from Mom, Dad, Chloe, and relatives I barely spoke with. Our family group chat was on fire. Messages flew by. What did you do to us? They've frozen the accounts. Call your father right now. A news alert popped up, stating that the city had suspended contracts with Bennett Civic Systems pending a fraud investigation, and it included a photo of my father in a suit, jaw tight, heading into the state attorney general's office. The quiet whistleblower meeting I'd had weeks before with Natalie by my side and Ethan Caldwell across the table had turned into a full-blown storm. I'd given them everything: emails, contracts, billing patterns, safety letters, bank statements, my uncle's documents, my mother's files, the waiver, and the wedding recording. They hadn't promised anything, just said, "We'll investigate." Clearly, they had. In the stairwell, I checked voicemail. My father's message arrived first, furious. They raided the office, stole the servers, and the bank froze our accounts. You've destroyed your own family because you couldn't take a joke. Delete. My mother was in tears, begging me to tell investigators that I forced her to open that drawer. Chloe's voice shook as she talked about the frozen trust, the condo down payment, and reporters calling her office. I know you spoke with them. Please call me back. I need to understand. I simply held the phone and breathed. This was the cost of unraveling every thread. My father requested a meeting through counsel, and we ended up in a small conference room at his lawyer's office, with him and his attorney on one side and Natalie and I on the other. He appeared older, the edges of his confidence fraying. You did this? You turned a family dispute into a criminal case, he said. I looked him in the eyes and said, this isn't about hurt feelings. It's about fraud, bribery, falsified safety reports, and using family as a cover. The speech only made it easier for me to stop pretending. He tried to make me feel guilty about my mother's situation, my sister's frozen trust, and the collapsing company. In every story I tell, you'll be the ungrateful daughter who betrayed us. I shrugged. You've always told a twisted version of me, but now I have my own story and evidence. In the end, he accepted a plea bargain. The charges were serious: fraud, bribery, and falsifying safety reports. He was still sentenced to prison, but for fewer years than he could have. Bennett Civic Systems lost city contracts, so Uncle Jack negotiated to buy a small, clean piece of the business with heavy oversight. My mother cooperated fully, avoiding charges, but had to quietly resign from her school district job and relocate to a smaller space. Chloe walked into my climbing gym in an old t-shirt and rental shoes, saying, I read the reports, all of them, and you were right. She began therapy, finally trying to figure out why she had stayed silent for so long. She had lost her condo and a significant portion of her financial safety net. I didn't need to be right, I replied. I needed to be believed. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was more than the silence I grew up with. I moved out of the attic and into a small apartment with too much light and no ghosts. I kept my hospital cybersecurity job but started assisting whistleblowers in securing their digital evidence on the side. People sometimes ask if I regret it, if I'd go back and keep my mouth shut to keep the family together, and here's the truth. I don't play his entire speech because he doesn't have that kind of space in my life anymore. The wedding recording became a short clip in a training about how emotional abuse and financial crime frequently coexist in the same house. Fear, favoritism, and money kept my family apart. Blowing the whistle did not break something whole. Rather, it shattered an illusion. Respect, which could have made us a family, was missing long before investigators got involved. Self-respect was the first family I chose. So now I'll ask you, if standing up for yourself meant losing the people who taught you to stay small, but gaining a life where you can finally breathe, would you do it? And if you've ever been treated like the mistake in your own family, what would your version of truly choosing yourself look like?